Starlink has been a game changer for so many keeping connected on the road, whether RVers or boaters. But we get asked all the time, especially lately, on what are the good alternatives to Starlink? Can you keep abundantly connected as an RVer or a boater wherever you travel without relying on Starlink? And the answer is yes. Stay tuned for some of the tips. Hi, I'm Chris at the Mobile Internet Resource Center here answering one of our frequently asked questions we get, and that is, well, what are the alternatives to Starlink? Starlink has made getting connected in some cases almost too easy, and people have grown to rely on it because, well, you literally just plug it in, turn it on. As long as you've got a clear view of the sky, you are connected. But Starlink also does have a lot of drawbacks, and a lot of these drawbacks are pretty significant for people. Whether it's how Starlink performs when there's obstructions and trees and shade, whether it's power consumption, whether it is the constantly changing terms of service or the ever-increasing service price, or some people just do not want to support SpaceX in an ongoing fashion and are looking for alternatives to keep connected. And well, cellular is actually a pretty amazing alternative in so many of the places where Starlink keep you connected. Cellular will work just as well, if not better. And if your experience with cellular is several years ago or in the pre-5G era and you have not been keeping your hardware up to date to the latest 5G modems and paying attention to the ever-expanding coverage maps, your impressions of the cellular performance you might expect might be well off of reality, particularly when you are combining 2 or 3 different cellular plans and different cellular carriers into your connectivity arsenal. You might find that you have more than enough coverage, and often cellular will perform faster downloads and substantially faster uploads than Starlink will in a whole lot of places. Now, of course, cellular doesn't have that it works everywhere nature that Starlink does, where you can just find some open, clear view of the sky. You do have a little bit of trade-offs around the cellular coverage maps. But as I mentioned, the coverage maps have expanded a lot, and particularly when you layer multiple carriers' coverage maps together, you'll find that a lot of places that you might be surprised you're able to get connected have extremely good cellular coverage and performance. Years and years ago, we actually wrote an app called Coverage that lets you make your own custom cellular coverage map by layering the different carriers you keep on board as you travel, and you can build a very, very comprehensive cellular-based solution by combining 2 or 3 or even 4 different cellular plans, and that would potentially still end up costing less than the monthly cost for our Starlink service, depending on how you stack your plans. Now, of course, juggling multiple cellular plans can be a bit of a hassle, but if you actually use a router that supports either load balancing, failover, or bonding, you could actually combine them in a way that increases reliability so that you're actually using multiple cellular carriers at once. Or if you're keeping Starlink around in the mix and you're trying to make up for drops from obstructions and stuff, keep your Starlink in the mix and use a cellular bonding router to give you more and more reliability by having all those multiple connections active at once. So there's some really powerful tools that are not that expensive and not that hard to use that can help you really increase cellular's reliability. Now, if you don't want to have multiple cellular plans from multiple carriers juggling in your arsenal or using a dual modem router, there are also new types of cellular plans that support multiple cell carriers, multiple cell networks with a single SIM card. Plans like Mobile Must Have Roam Link will let you connect to different carriers depending on where your coverage is, so you can kind of have, all your carriers on one SIM card on one device that you can easily switch between, so you can get the best of all coverage maps. And Roamlink also mates very well as a nice combination to Starlink, so you get all the good cellular coverage maps and Starlink. And because sometimes the one downside of cellular is there are some places with no coverage whatsoever, and you might be traveling and find that you still want or need or crave Starlink connectivity. And one of the best strategies that so many people have embraced is keeping Starlink around, keeping it installed onto your RV or your boat, but using it not active every month, but as a reserve parachute for when you get to those places with no other cellular coverage. In particular, if you look at Starlink's $50 a month, 50 gigabyte plan, you can just activate that as needed when you get someplace with no coverage at all with just a few clicks, and you probably will have more than enough data to get through that potential dry spell until you're back into a place with ample cellular coverage. And this actually has been the strategy we have been using for over a year now. We have not needed our Starlink since the last time we camped in Big Bend National Park over a year ago, and we've traveled by boat and RV all over the country and have had really great connectivity with cellular. But it is a real nice, reassuring thing to still have the Starlink mounted and know that for 50 bucks, we can get online if we really, really need to in a satellite-only area.
This content is made possible by our premium members over at the Mobile Internet Resource Center. We strive to create unbiased content for our audience. We are not sponsored, we're not driven by affiliate sales, and we don't sell stuff. We are here to provide unbiased content, and for that we are funded by our members. And our members get a lot of additional perks for their support. So please, if mobile internet is an important part of your lifestyle, consider supporting us.
Now, the other question we get all the time is, well, what about satellite alternatives to Starlink? You know, things that will work when you're way, way far away from cellular coverage. Are there other things in the pipeline that will give equivalent, satellite broadband as Starlink? And in a lot of ways, Starlink is the only game in town when it comes to satellite broadband that is appropriate for mobile users. But in the pipeline is Amazon's Project Kuiper. So that is going to begin to launch later in 2025, but it will probably still be at least a year away before we even get details of what potential Kuiper plans and tiers of service might be. So Kuiper is still a ways off, but it is coming, and there are other satellite constellations that are in the works. They're just all playing catch up to Starlink. A lot of times when you're in remote areas, you don't necessarily need full high-speed satellite Starlink broadband. You can get by with satellite messengers, or a lot of phones now include built-in satellite messaging capabilities through your cell carrier, or in case of iPhones, directly through Apple, that will let you get basic messaging and basic location tracking and a few other services even when you are completely out of cellular coverage by satellites. And there's a lot more satellite direct-to-cell stuff in the pipeline as well. So that's going to be a growing area of technology. And another thing we get asked about is, well, what about boaters? Well, the good thing with boaters is cellular travels incredibly well over open water. So if you have an antenna mounted high up on your radar arch or your mast, a cellular antenna, you will probably see that you can get connected sometimes over 15 miles offshore. So a lot of coastal cruising actually has really great cellular coverage now. And Great Loopers, it's almost anywhere you go on the Great Loop, you will have good to great cell coverage. So a lot of boaters can get by without Starlink, and you'd be surprised in all the places you can succeed in staying connected if you have good antennas and good mobile internet gear. But if you are going offshore, then, well, Starlink, if you want to stream far offshore, might be your only answer. But boaters, you might want to look back at some of those lower data options that are more suitable for just weather and messaging and location tracking. There's plenty of other satellite options, and there will be more in the future that keep you connected at lower speeds if you want to go do a crossing without relying on Starlink. In conclusion, Starlink is great technology. The technology has been wonderful to track and see how quickly it has evolved and gotten to the point of being pretty darn amazing. But don't let yourself think that it is the only game in town for connectivity. In fact, you could probably keep connected just as well, if not better, for potentially significantly less money per month by doing a little bit of thinking about what your actual needs are, what the ways you can complement Starlink with cellular or replace Starlink with cellular, or put Starlink onto the, basically your reserve parachute list, and then just embrace a little gear like a high gain antenna on a mast or a fancy router that can bond multiple cellular connections together, and you'll find that you can probably stay connected without relying on Starlink and be thriving in your mobile internet arsenal that way. So if you are looking for Starlink alternatives, come on over to the Mobile Internet Resource Center. We've got a lot of guidance on how to use Starlink, as well as how to use cellular and how to use them together, or how to build a cellular arsenal in a redundant fashion and a reliable fashion without relying on Starlink at all. So it's slightly more complicated than just sticking a Starlink on your roof and dealing with the obstructions when you run across them. But overall, you'll have better service, cheaper service, and potentially more reliable service by thinking through your actual needs and your actual technology arsenal, and using Starlink where appropriate and embracing other technologies when they might be a better choice for you. So that's it.
These videos are brought to you by our premium members, our mobile internet aficionados. They make it possible for us to track this news and create these videos. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, leave a comment, subscribe to our channel, or better yet, consider becoming a member yourself.